What's good, all my soul G's? Back, another episode, really busy episode type shit. Cause I already knew about it technically, but I forgot. Cause yesterday I just did the fucking results for the Mexican election. Claudia, I don't know how to pronounce her last name perfectly, so I'm not gonna try. She won, and now today, this CGT podcast is going to be dedicated towards the Indian election, trying to get as much information as I can and spread it out there from some reliable sources, but also just trying to get an understanding of what the outcome means for the world, but also for Indians. Now, India is interesting because it's very obviously it's different from the Mexican. It's different from the whole Mexico shit I was doing yesterday. Almost completely different in a way, simply because you know India was taken over by British and all the other shit a while ago. And when they got their independence, they just just now really getting to a point where people are actually considering them to be like, not saying just now in 2020, but around the turn of the century is when people started considering them being like one of the best countries in the world. Basically, they have, I think, if I'm not mistaken, they have the most people in one country. If not, they close second to China. So we're talking about a very influential country just based off of the population size alone. But also with the narrative is different. India as a former British colony has like, a little bit closer ties than a lot of countries in Eastern Asia do. I mean, Western Asia do. And even in today's time, you got some like BRICS where you would see that they really have the leeway to choose whether or not they want to be 100% loyal to America or the East and Russia and China, basically. With BRICS, it's kind of interesting because, based off what I know about India, I was watching this like video about how India and China, like, they have a shared border and they have a lot of conflict over that shared border over the last, for a while. But to this day, they having that conflict. But it's just interesting to see that they can put that to the side and agree that, hey, we don't fuck with America to the same extent. Even if India portrays that they do. Even if India portrays that they do. Breaks proves that, you know, they ain't kissing no ass no more. They ain't kissing the Western ass no more. And America is very lucky that they share that border with China and they have dispute with China and they don't want to just become a Chinese bitch the same way they don't want to become an American bitch. But if China was to say, hey, we don't give a fuck about that border, y'all can take it, and India and China started becoming like even closer, that would end, I genuinely believe that would be the end of Western hegemony around the fucking world, Western power, Western domination around the world. But outside of that, we living in an interesting time. I got this article pulled up right here. That ultimate election year. So this episode is geared around India, but I want y'all to check out just how many countries are having elections this year, and obviously why that matters is because it's going to impact the world, bro. Like, if all these countries are choosing their leaders, it's going to basically be a way for you to peep into what these leaders stand for in their campaigns, or if they're getting reelected, what they've done in the past and how that's going to be projected in the future. Especially in the case of India, where Modi, the last two times he won, it was with way more support than this time. But we're gonna get into that anyway. Let's stay focused on this. Well, we have the most elections. Let's see, the ultimate election year around the world. National elections are scheduled or expected in at least 64 countries, as well as the European Union, which altogether represent almost half of the global population. So we are living in a time of change this year, and it's so important for people to be aware of this. I do not see nowhere on the mainstream media telling people this. Like, it's not just an election year in America. And with that being said, we should be peeping out how the rest of the world is electing their people so that we can get a feel of who the fuck, whoever we gonna elect, how they gonna end up be interacting with these people. So obviously they got India right here because they got the most people and they have an election. The election started in April and it ended in May. They just announced the results, if I'm not mistaken, yesterday. The European Union is having an election year. It's the election for the European Parliament between June the 6th and the 9th. Obviously, the United States of America is having their election for the president, the Senate, and the House of Representatives this year. It's going to be later on in the year. Indonesia, with 279 million people, having a presidential election, regional representative council, and a House of Representative elections too. Pakistan, next door neighbors to India, not so neighborly, uh, with 243 million people, having they had their election on February the 8th. Bangladesh had their election already. Russia had their election back in March. I'm pretty sure Putin forced himself to win. No surprise, shit. Mexico, we talked about Mexico having their election. We talked about Mexico having their election yesterday. Iran is having their election. The Islamic Republic of Iran is having their election with 89 million people. 89.5 million people. The UK having their House of Commons election this year. South Africa having their National Assembly election this year. The Republic of Korea having their National Assembly uh, this year. Algeria, Ukraine, Uzbekistan, Ghana, Mozambique, Madagascar. I'm tripping. Venezuela, Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela having a presidential election. Democratic Republic of Korea, aka North Korea. I didn't even know they had elections. Honestly, Supreme People's Assembly. I guess that's for like their version of the Congress. Taiwan having their presidential election and legislative. Syria is supposed to have theirs. Mali, Sri Lanka, Romania, Chad. Like, we got a lot of elections this year, and I just want to point that out so people can understand like why there's going to be so many distractions this year. They don't want you to understand what's going on in the world. They want to be able to control the narrative through the media mostly. But with that being said, if you were to be aware of all these other countries, politics, and all that other shit, it would make you politically intelligent. And I can guarantee you, they don't want that. The last thing they want, more than anything, honestly, political intelligence, especially when it comes to foreign relations. So keep an eye out for as much news as you can. I'm gonna try to cover a couple of these. Like, obviously, I'm gonna try to cover the ones that I find to be interesting, just because of population and also just relative to uh, the outcome of the world and where I'm at in the United States right now. But hold on, I want to fix this camera shit. It's really bugging me right now. I hope that works. But anyway, with that being said, we're gonna move on to the next thing. Once again, hopping into India. Okay, I got 3 videos for us to cover. We're gonna start right here. We got Al Jazeera, why India's election is such a big deal. And once again, this is I don't watch these videos before time, and I'm gonna be real. Obviously, I would know more about Mexico than India, or United States or Canada and the Western shit than India, simply because of the language and the proximity to closeness and all. I mean, location. But we're gonna let Al Jazeera tell us why this is important, or suggest to us why it's important.
Biggest election. It's happening in India. 970 million voters, more than 2,600.
We're gonna pause that for a second. I'm gonna turn this down. I'm gonna try to turn this down so that the volume won't be too loud on the video. Try to balance that out. I think that should be decent. Hopefully. Start it over. Oh wait, let's give it a second. Okay. All right, I think I'm good now. All right.
Election. It's happening in India. 970 million voters, more than 2,600 political parties, and one likely outcome. 5 more years of Prime Minister Modi.
So now we know that. The Indian presidential terms are 5 years. 5 years.
It is safe to assume that Narendra Modi is headed for a 3rd term.
Modi's approval rating makes him the most popular leader in the world right now.
Well, we have Bollywood stars in India. Modi has probably surpassed them in terms of popularity.
He gets a lot of credit for India's booming economy and its growing status on the world stage. But some people are worried about the direction the country is going in. They say Modi and his party are changing India's democracy into a more authoritarian state, one that prioritizes India's majority Hindu population and threatens minorities, especially Muslims.
So there's no doubt that Modi's government has attacked some of the key features of India's democratic setup.
The fear is that the democracy in our country is slowly slipping.
So here are 5 things to know to help you understand what's going on in India and why this election is such a big deal.
I mean, try to relate to this. Like, this man is going in for his 3rd term. That's like, and their terms are 5 years. So this is going to mean 15 years of one man being the president or the prime minister, basically. And I don't even think Americans or people in the Western world can even understand that. Besides, I guess in a senatorial or in a judge seat, but to have imagine having a president basically being threatening being in office for 15 whole years, bro. 15 whole years, and it's supposed to be a democracy where people are able to like have. If you got 2,000 parties. I think she said they got 2,000 parties. If you got 2,000 parties and this man somehow just constantly get reelected, that could, in some people's mind, bring up the idea of like, what the fuck going on here? Like, how the fuck is still him? Like, just only him? That could bring that idea to mind. I'm not saying it's necessarily right, but it could be.
The first thing to get your head around is the sheer scale of holding an election in a country of 1.4 billion people. The number of registered voters in India is more than all the voters in these 7 countries, which also have elections this year. It'll take 15 million election workers, more than 1 million polling stations, and it's happening in 7 phases from April to June, with different parts of the country voting at different times.
It's always a grand democratic exercise, and you have every year stories of folks taking up electoral voting machines to tiny places where there's only 3 or 4 people voting, but they make the effort to cross rivers and climb hills to get there.
Now, India is a parliamentary system, like the UK, for example. People will be voting for candidates to represent them in the lower house of parliament. There are 543 seats, and the political party or alliance that gets a majority forms a government and chooses the prime minister. The next thing you need to know is who's up against who.
So once again, we learning today. Like, I mean, I kind of already knew, but I didn't put in my mind hand to hand that the parliamentary system is different from the congressional system, obviously. But they elect prime ministers through having a majority, which is interesting because that's kind of what the electoral college is, but not really. So there are similarities there, but let's just see what else you got to say.
There are thousands of parties running, but here are the key players. There's the ruling BJP, that's Modi's party. It leads a political alliance of several other parties, but has been able to get a majority on its own in the last 2 elections. This time, Modi has set a target for an even bigger win. He wants 370 seats for the BJP alone and 400 with his allies. On the opposition side, you've got the Congress party. It dominated Indian politics for decades, but these days it's much weaker, and it's linked up with a bunch of other parties to take on the BJP as the India alliance.
The fight is not between 2 political formations. The fight is a fight to defend the idea of India. And that is why we came up with the name.
That's Rahul Gandhi. He's seen as the leader of the Congress party, and he's from India's most famous political dynasty. His father, grandmother, and great-grandfather were all prime ministers. Now, Rahul Gandhi might be the face of Congress, but he's not the official leader of the India alliance. It's not yet clear who that is.
The India alliance has got entangled in leadership issues, squabbles over programs, squabbles over agenda, and it hasn't really gained traction.
Contrast that with the BJP and Modi, who's both really popular and powerful. Let's run through some reasons that explain his appeal. Modi's from a pretty modest background, not a political dynasty. He projects himself as a decisive leader who gets things done. A break from the coalition governments that came before him when there was a lot of infighting and corruption scandals.
In a certain way, he conveys an image of integrity, probity, and transparency.
India's economy is also doing really well right now. It's the fastest growing major economy in the world.
At a time when the global economy is still struggling, India clearly has a better record under Modi in the last few years.
Quick disclaimer, not everyone in India is necessarily feeling the benefits. Young people especially are struggling to find jobs. Rahul Gandhi's made that a big part of his campaign, and thousands of farmers have been protesting because they can't make a decent living.
Modi Sarkar Murdabad!
But Modi also talks about...
I wonder what I'm gonna have to get beautiful sister who be talking about the farming rights, going against people like Bill Gates. I gotta remember. I'm gonna have to, at the end of this, I'm gonna go into it.
About how his policies have lifted millions out of poverty.
25 करोड़ लोग गरीबी से बाहर आए हैं.
Under one government program, 800 million people receive a free ration of grain every month, and there's no doubt who it's coming from. Many people also approve of the
That's hilarious. This man put his face on the bags of food, bro. His face and his party members' face on that motherfucker.
way Modi has raised India's profile internationally through things like hosting the G20 summit and international tours where he's often received like a rock star.
Well, the last time I saw someone on the stage here was Bruce Springsteen, and he didn't get the welcome that Prime Minister Modi has got.
Modi's also positioning India as a space power.
India has become the first country in the world to successfully land a craft near the moon's south pole.
India is on the moon.
It becomes another element in the broader.
Like, they don't tell people this. They told everybody about the people orbiting in space or super high up in space, all the billionaires, and when they had the little planes and they was orbiting up in space, they told everybody about that. How come I did not know India was on the moon? I ain't know that.
Idea that under Modi, India is rising, India is growing.
He's popular because he's macho, he talks business. That muscular image is very important, and it seems to go down well with a lot of Indians.
Now, there's another key part of Modi and the BJP's appeal, and it really deserves its own section, and that's Hindutva, a political ideology that promotes Hinduism as the dominant political and cultural force in India. Hindus make up 80% of India's population. The next biggest group is Muslims, and there are also significant numbers of Christians and Sikhs. They're all considered minority communities, but we're talking about millions of people. Now, when India became independent in 1947, it was established as a secular democracy, so the state is not meant to favor any one religion. But many accuse Modi and the BJP of trying to change that by pushing policies that favor the Hindu majority.
Hindutva is broadly the ideology of the BJP, and it's based on the sense that India ought to be a land run by and for the Hindus, while minorities may still be a part of this fabric. It is one that imagines a Hindu state in the way that Pakistan.
So the way we presented it, or the way that's being presented now, is just basically that India is like the Hindu version of China, basically. Like, that's the vibe I'm getting. Like, that's at least under the leadership of Modi and his party.
Is, for example, a state for Muslims.
It is very important to make a distinction between Hinduism and Hindutva. You have practicing Hindus who go to temples, practice rituals, but they don't necessarily subscribe to the BJP's ideology, which is underpinned on political Hindutva.
People point to many examples of the government platforming Hinduism in a very public way, like the opening of the Ayodhya temple. Hindus believe the site was the birthplace of one of their most prominent gods, Ram. But a mosque stood there for hundreds of years, until 1992, when Hindu mobs tore it down.
That led to nationwide communal riots that killed at least 2,000 people, mostly Muslims.
For years afterwards, it was a subject of a bitter land dispute over who the land actually belongs to. But now the temple is in place.
And in January, Modi led the opening ceremony, delivering on what had been a core pledge of the BJP for years.
The BJP sees it as a milestone in its history.
Being present at very clearly religious events and platforming those as being definitive about India is quite new and a big part of Modi's appeal.
But it's a big part of the criticism too. And that brings us to our last point, why some people are fearful about the direction that India is going in under Modi's leadership. Let's start with the media. The government and its supporters are accused of controlling the messaging in traditional media and online, squeezing out critical voices. Reporters Without Borders says violence against journalists, the politically partisan media, and the concentration of media ownership all.
So basically, we get into the regular, we get into regular governmental stuff. We get into regular like power crazy people shit. Like, I mean, at the end of the day, it does feel like people are
demonstrate that
it does feel like people are starting to bring attention to it now more, because this is about to be his third term in office, and it's kind of like in their mind supplementing a whole generation of people to only seeing India in this light of being, you know, BJP led, Hindu led, and stuff like that, instead of being like a diverse place where it's not just Hindus, but it's a whole bunch of type of people, and they all are in the spotlight. That can't be done in they light because I think it's because of money reasons and marketing reasons, honestly. But outside of that, just because, like I said, it's greed, bruh.
Press freedom is in crisis.
The mainstream media has been completely co-opted by the government. In fact, rarely do you see a report which calls the government to account.
If you open any TV channel or a newspaper, there's only Mr. Narendra Modi.
But it's not just the media. There are also accusations that the government is using or misusing its power to target activists and opposition politicians.
You have the sense that the investigative agencies run by the central government have been used as a political tool against those who are critical.
Another major criticism of Modi and the BJP is that their policies have created an atmosphere that's enabled discrimination and violence against minorities, especially Muslims.
That's been one of the glaring features of the last 10 years, and it's just becoming worse by the day.
Muslims have been targeted by Hindu mobs under all sorts of pretexts, and videos of attacks are often shared online. Mosques have been set on fire.
Tragic. So, now that it's been revealed once again, my idea is that, under the Western hegemony of the world, it's impossible for real leaders to be chosen in a democratic process because the borders that have been chosen are not realistic. What we define, the countries that we define as, and the borders that we use are too wide for many cases. It's based off of when it's literally based off of when back in the day when people it's based off of back in the day when people like the Europeans went around the world and they literally were controlling places like India, China, Japan, Asia, most of Asia, most of Northern Africa, most of Africa. All these places in their countries were defined back then, and nobody has really went back and addressed it. And if they do, it's based off of them just trying to get more land and to keep the other shit they had before in a wholeness. Like, so until we really address that and that understanding, it's not no China, it's not no India. Those are places that were literally forged together by outside forces, and those people had to be, they had to go along with it over time when they got their independence because it benefited them on that stage where the biggest threat, you got a threat so big coming from, multiple directions. With the you don't necessarily get along with Pakistan. You don't necessarily get along with China. You don't necessarily get along with the Europeans and shit like that. So you don't necessarily get along with most of the Middle East or some of the Middle East at that time. So once you get into that understanding, you feel like it's better for you to just say, hey, maybe we are India. We can keep all this. We can keep all these states. We can define the states and stuff like that and make just one country so that whenever we need to, we can defend each other. But that's not realistic still. That's still only based off of us living in a world where the paradigm is based off of European and Western hegemony. But obviously over time it's getting away from that. What's her name? I know this is so general. I'm gonna see what pop up. What's her name? Vandana Shiva. Okay, let's look up Vandana Shiva on Vandana Shiva. see what she think about the Indian presidential race. If she got any social medias or anything like that. Let's go to news. Let's just type in. I'm gonna type in Modi and see if they got anything what she got to say about Modi. All right, let's go to YouTube. See what's up. Well, that's that, I guess. On to the next video. This is I guess this is going to be a more critical outlook.
This news is funded by viewers like you. Please support.
This one's going to be a more critical outlook on the whole situation going on with the BJP and Modi. I'm guessing it's by Democracy Now.
Support our work at democracynow.org/give. We begin today's show in India, where preliminary results from the world's largest election suggest Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi's Hindu nationalist BJP party will have a reduced majority in parliament. Meanwhile, the opposition alliance, known by the acronym INDIA, India, and led by Rahul Gandhi's centrist Congress Party, is doing better than expected. India's 7-phase election began April 19th, ended Saturday. If Modi wins, as expected, he would be just the second Indian leader to serve a third term after India's first Prime Minister, Nehru. Many voters faced searingly hot temperatures as they went to the polls. Some record-breaking temperatures. Others, like vocal Modi critic Arvind Kejriwal, surrendered to prison after voting. He's a former senior tax official who founded an anti-corruption party and was arrested on corruption charges, which he denies.
I want to say to the people of Delhi that I'm going to jail again, not because I have done a scam, but because I have raised my voice against dictatorship.
Meanwhile, in North Kashmir, a candidate known as Engineer Rashid.
That's what I'm saying. That's an easy go-to, bro. Like, even if you in the party, you would want to rotate who is considered to be the leader, right? Just so people won't be questioning, like, damn, is this shit a dictatorship? Just so they won't even be able to say, they won't be able to say it. You should have, your party should be so deep. Your party is literally a group of parties. Y'all party should be so deep that y'all should just have people on backup. The same way my boy AMLO party, AMLO and his party did in Mexico. The same way they did in Mexico. So the fact that he is going to be now in power for 15 years is very weird, honestly, for it to be a quote unquote democracy. And you got billions of people in one country, and somehow one man just keep on getting like that is weird.
Who's jailed on militancy charges, has won his race against a candidate who has already conceded. Opponents of Prime Minister Narendra Modi have accused him of using hate speech after he described Muslims in India as infiltrators. This is Modi addressing an election rally in April.
Do you think your hard-earned money should be given to infiltrators? Would you accept this? This is what the Congress's manifesto is saying.
This comes as journalists who are critical of Prime Minister Modi have been expelled, investigated, and raided by his government. For more, we go to New Delhi, India. We're joined by Rana Ayub.
I mean, I could see if he's saying that if he's talking about other countries and shit funding their party. But outside of that, if he's really just saying like directly like because that clip wasn't really enough for me, but obviously gonna dig deeper, but that clip wasn't enough. Like him just saying that, he could just mean like, dang bro, like you're gonna let them come in, these fucking invaders type shit come in with their money, trying to get these people in power.
Indian journalist and global opinions writer for The Washington Post, where her latest article is headlined, "Journalism in India is Under Assault." She's the author of Gujarat Files, Anatomy of a Cover-Up. We thank you so much for joining us, Rana. If you can start off by talking about the significance of the election results. What is so surprising today?
Hello, Amy. Good to be back on the show. Everybody in this country and exit polls in this country were predicting a massive third term for Prime Minister Modi. What is significant is that this entire election was fought around the cult of Modi, which it is fought around the vilification of Muslims. In every electoral speech, every rally that Modi took, he was vilifying Muslims. He was calling them infiltrators, outsiders, so on and so forth. More than anything else, it was probably also one of the most undemocratic elections, with opposition leaders being jailed before the elections, income tax and enforcement directorate raids on the Indian opposition, their bank accounts frozen. In that context, when the numbers of the ruling party is reduced to this number, to what we are seeing today, it's quite a massive reduction. It really impacts the cult and the popularity of Modi, because the entire election campaign was fought around Modi's guarantee, Modi's promise. Across billboards in India, you had Modi literally blessing Indians, right? That's what he was doing. So I think this election result is specifically 3 months after the Ram Temple inauguration, which was built on a demolished mosque in Ayodhya. Now, the significant part of this is that 80% of the constituency, Faizabad, where the Ram Temple stands, is Hindus. And today the BJP lost in that constituency, which means you cannot drum up the anti-Muslim, Hindu majoritarian sentiment to the extent, because people in India wanted jobs. People in India, there is rural distress. And I think that has really spoken up this time around. The people of India have spoken up against what they have been facing. I think the anti-Muslim rhetoric has not quite worked for Modi this time.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, these countries are so whack. And when you're leading a country with 1 billion people, of course you're going to be able to get away with a lot, bro. You're going to be able to hide a lot of shit because it's 1 billion people.
Around in the third term. And if that had happened, that would have been really dangerous for India's democracy and India's secular character.
And Ron, I wanted to ask you, India has long had a vibrant leftist and communist movement. How did those left parties, how have they been doing in this election from what you can tell?
At this point of time, we have something called India Alliance, which also includes, left parties and the left in Kerala and other bastions. I think this time around, the India Alliance, which includes the Indian National Congress and other regional parties, which stitch together an alliance based on caste, class, language, religion. I think that played a fundamental role, and I think a big credit needs to be given to the regional parties of India, especially in Uttar Pradesh. Now, the BJP derives its biggest support system from Uttar Pradesh in North India, where we have also seen all sorts of hate crimes, bulldozing of Muslim households. In a state like that, in a province like that, the BJP has been reduced to half. So I think local actors and regional parties who have worked really hard in this election, trying to move the conversation from the anti-Muslim rhetoric, the fundamentalism, back to unemployment, back to rural distress. I think that has played a significant role in this election. And the hubris of Modi, I mean, this entire campaign, okay, just before.
Like literally, bro, dictator status at this point. I hate to say it, but of course, when you got 1 billion people, can get away with a lot of stuff. I said that already, but the reason I'm saying it again because, like, you can get away with a lot of stuff. Like, people can be suffering. Like, these people need jobs and all the other shit, and he's moving on to make it seem like they so prosperous that he can just afford to be like walking around doing like ceremonies and shit in certain parts of the country, but not other parts, and that shit not even part of your, that's not even significant in my opinion, simply because your job is supposed to be primarily improving the lives of the people in the country. And until all the lives of the people in the country have been done, like improved, I don't even think it will be like real leaderish, like a real leader wouldn't even be out there doing no fucking ceremonies and shit like it was. Like, that's fake.
Before the election result, Modi was meditating in Kanyakumari, imitating Swami Vivekananda, and all the cameras surrounding him, a godlike figure. He also said in an interview that he believes that he was not biological born, but divine born. So this election result, it might still give Modi a third term, but it has punctured the hubris around Modi, where he has gone around telling that he's the most popular leader in the world. He stopped the war in the world. He stopped the Ukraine war. So that hubris has been punctured, and I think the regional parties have a big role to play, along with the Indian National Congress.
And also, you mentioned the anti-Muslim campaigning. The Citizenship Amendment Act, the new citizenship law that recently passed in India that Modi has vowed now to implement. Could you talk about that and this whole effectively creating religious criteria for citizenship?
Well, the Muslims in India have been living in fear. I mean, with the results, there has been a great deal of cynicism because the Citizenship Amendment Act and the National Register of Citizens, it allows, Muslims will have to prove their citizenship. And persecuted minorities, except Muslims, will be given citizenship in India. And it was notified just 2 months before the elections. This, along with what the government is trying to introduce, the Uniform Civil Code, so that the Muslim code will be taken away, and many such majoritarian politics. But what is interesting with this election result is that I was sitting this morning with Muslims who have been arrested in the past. I was watching the election results with them. And these are people who have been quite cynical. When I asked them, what did this mean to them? And they said that this might not immediately stop the persecution of Muslims, but it might give them the breathing space. It might give them the space to resist at a time when some of India's best known student activists and Muslim activists are behind bars. So I think it's a bit of a shot in the arm. It might be too early yet, not knowing how one can predict Modi's majoritarian politics, but it has certainly given a shot in the arm to the ones who wanted to resist and to hope for a better India, for a democratic India. Because the biggest fear for all of us was It was the democracy of the country which was at stake, the democratic norms which were at stake in this election. With the world's largest democracy, voter suppression, Muslim voters were not allowed to vote in many areas, in many constituencies in India. So with all this kept in mind, I feel that a reduced majority for...
That's crazy because, like, they were doing all of that fucked up, like, control greed shit, trying to stop these people from voting. And they still ended up losing way more of the majority than they even thought they was going. They thought they was going to end up winning more. They ended up losing way more than they ever thought they was going to lose. They didn't lose the majority, but they lost. They don't got no grip on it like they had before. So they got to actually get their shit together. Like, and I'm pretty sure they hoping this is going to be Modi's last term.
Modi could be a sigh of relief for Muslims in the country.
Comedian John Oliver addressed Prime Minister Modi in a new episode of his show This Week Tonight, which he said he doubted would be allowed to air in India. And in fact, it has not. And it's not available on YouTube there either. Oliver with Last Week Tonight. Also, the highly acclaimed award-winning Indian writer Arundhati Roy has said if the BJP wins this election, India will not remain a democracy. This is Arundhati Roy when she accepted the 2023 European Essay Award in September.
It is no longer just our leaders we must fear, but a whole section of the population. The banality of evil, as Hannah Arendt would have called it, the normalization of evil is now manifest in our streets, in our classrooms, in our very many public spaces. The mainstream press, the hundreds of 24-hour news channels have been harnessed to the cause of fascist majoritarianism. India's constitution has effectively been set aside. The Indian Penal Code is being rewritten. If the current regime wins a majority in 2024, it is very likely we will see a new constitution.
That's the great writer Arundhati Roy. Rana Ayub, if you can respond, and also for a global audience, you are the author of...
I don't know why, but as she described that, it really giving me like Project 2025 vibes, like what they say Project 2025 is in America. Like that plan, they give me the vibe for that. Like, we're going to get in, implement all of the religious/spiritual ideals we want to, and then behind it, get a whole bunch of people following us. So even if we don't take care of fucking 500 million people worth of people, we're always going to be able to secure power.
Gujarat Files, who don't understand who Narendra Modi is, going back to the Gujarat massacre when he was in charge of Gujarat, and then denied entry into the United States for years for responsibility for that massacre. If you can explain who he is, the past and, well, future Prime Minister of India.
Well, Amy, he is... I'll take you back to an election, to a debate on a channel called NDTV when the 9/11 terror attack took place, and Narendra Modi was on that debate. He was back then just a BJP leader, and when he was asked to comment on the issue, he said, "Well, the root cause of it was Islam," and he cherry-picked quotes of Islam from the Quran. Back in 2002, when he was the Chief Minister of Gujarat, I have written a book on the Gujarat carnage of Muslims and the extrajudicial murder of Muslims, where fake encounters were done of Muslims. Where
That's probably why America like him, because he was probably on board for that war on terror shit, simply because of the fact that, in a way it seemed like this man he's fucking anti-Muslim. That's what it seemed like. Anti anything Hindu.
Where they were alleged to be.
Not to say he hates it, but he don't want that shit to be Indian.
Terrorists, and they were shot dead to create this image of Modi, the Hindu leader.
I mean, if you understand the history of India and the back and forth that they've had with Pakistan and overall the history of India, then you will understand why.
Under attack from Islamists. His entire career has centered around the Muslim as the other, as the enemy. When he was the chief minister of Gujarat, 1,000 Muslims were massacred under his watch. And soon after he became the chief minister of Gujarat. And around the same time, he had referred to the Muslims and the relief camps of where Muslims were being kept, the ones who were affected by the Gujarat carnage, as child-producing factories. His entire career has centered around vilification of Muslims. And then, of course, the series of fake encounters in which his deputy Amit Shah, the second most important man in the country, the Home Minister of India, was arrested in 2010 for the extrajudicial murder of a man called Sohrabuddin and Tulsi Prajapati and Sohrabuddin's wife, Kausarbi. He was later, of course, acquitted in the case. And so this is the history. And he was stopped by the United States from entering the country for his role in human rights excesses. This is the history of Narendra Modi. He played a big part in canvassing for a Ram temple when the Babri Masjid was demolished as a Hindu nationalist. He derives his inspiration from the RSS. It's a paramilitary Hindu nationalist organization, and he claims allegiance to that. Over a period of years, I mean, I have seen.
And that's the thing, bro. So many people will be like, oh, well, he's doing good, the economy popping, all that other stuff. But that doesn't make up for all the people suffering, though. Like, you can't just say, just wait it out, it'll reach you eventually. That trickle-down economic shit has been proven not to work. And especially the way they doing it is literally pointing out a specific group of people. And eventually, they're going to need them certain group of people.
Seen his journey when I went to Gujarat as a relief worker during the Gujarat riots to a journalist who was reporting the Gujarat elections and then the prime ministerial elections here. One thing that has remained consistent about Modi and his politics is Hindu majoritarianism, Hindu nationalism, and the vilification of Muslims. I mean, I think one of the most significant part of this election was that even during the Gujarat riots, he would refer to Muslims, he would allude to, or he would do dog whistles. There would be dog whistles against Muslims, but never a direct reference to Muslims. In this particular election, the speeches that he has given, he has called Muslims directly as infiltrators. He has said, if the opposition comes to power, you will have more Muslims in the cricket team. If the opposition comes to power, there will be more Muslims here. There is an entire an advertisement created by the BJP in which the Muslim is caricatured as somebody who has destroyed Indian civilization. So that is the history of Modi, political history.
Okay, so I'm going to just stop that one there. I mean, I find that subject really touchy just because of their history. I mean, it's fucked up in my opinion, no matter what. And if I had any influence over it, it would be way more equal. It wouldn't be it wouldn't be a Hindu nationalist state. It would just be a straight up democratic republic. Like anything that helps the people actually maintain balance and stability throughout the whole nation, if possible. But in that case, it's not possible. I don't think it's fucking possible because you got 1 billion people inside of one drawn out landmass that wasn't even really chosen by them like less than 100 years ago. Less than 100 years ago, you didn't have 1 billion people. Now you do. Like that speed of what that happened, in which that happened, then you still got the history of what that they had before that. It's kind of like skyrocketing him into the security, that would be needed for him to even be a dictator and get away with it.
And India is once again.
But yeah, last one. Turn that down. Last one. So for this one, we get into the whole idea of India and China being in BRICS together, and not them necessarily getting along with each other, but I guess they're coming together for this economic goal to be able to have some input and power in an alternative to the Western based banking system. With that being said, it kind of does make it interesting to, I mean, their alliance with America based off of all the sanctions and shit. But I don't think they're willing to sacrifice Modi and what he represents to that region, because he is so friendly towards the West, and in a way you can kind of say it's beneficial for them to have him in power because of the Hindu nationalist shit.
Expressed its opposition to China's Belt and Road Initiative, further emphasizing the impact of this infrastructure program on participating countries.
I'm sorry. I mean that I ain't want to just leave y'all hanging with that. It's easier for them to have him in power with the Hindu nationalist shit, because that's always going to
Once again expressed its opposition.
That's always going to bring tension in that region to where they can guarantee that that India will need America.
Opposition to China's Belt and Road Initiative, further emphasizing the impact of this infrastructure program on participating countries. During a media briefing, the spokesperson for India's External Affairs Ministry, Anirindam Bakshi, highlighted the cooperation between India and the Maldives. The cooperation is particularly in areas of security and development. This, he said, is based jointly on addressing shared challenges and priorities.
We look forward to continuing with our cooperation and partnership with Maldives, which is multifaceted, which covers areas for benefit of the Maldivian people, particularly in humanitarian assistance or welfare or disaster relief or other issues that I mentioned.
Further, in response to questions about the BRI forum hosted by China, the comments made the Maldives presidential representative endorsing the initiative. Bakshi reiterated India's well-known and consistent position on the BRI, India's concerns about the BRI's lack of respect for sovereignty and territorial integrity. Bakshi also mentioned that unlike in the past, India did not receive an invitation to this year's Belt and Road Forum. India has opted to stay out of the Belt and Road Initiative, and India believes that India has once again expressed its opposition to China's Belt and Road Initiative, further emphasizing the impact of this infrastructure program on participating countries. During a media briefing, the spokesperson for India's External Affairs Ministry, Anirindam Bakshi, highlighted the cooperation between India and the Maldives. The cooperation is particularly in areas of security and development. This, he said, is based jointly on addressing shared challenges and priorities.
We look forward to continuing with our cooperation and partnership with Maldives, which is multifaceted, which covers areas for benefit of the Maldivian people, particularly in humanitarian assistance or welfare or disaster relief or other issues that I mentioned.
Further, in response to questions about the BRI forum hosted by China, the comments made the Maldives presidential representative endorsing the initiative. Bakshi reiterated India's well-known and consistent position on the BRI, India's concerns about the BRI's lack of respect for sovereignty and territorial integrity. Bakshi also mentioned that unlike in the past, India did not receive an invitation to this year's Belt and Road Forum. India has opted to stay out of the Belt and Road Initiative, and India believes that the China-Pakistan economic corridor runs across parts of Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. Meanwhile, the Taliban administration wished to formally join the BRI mega infrastructure initiative. The acting Commerce Minister of the administration also said that it will send a technical team to China for further talks.
در برنامه‌هایی که چین داره از جمله سیپک است و جمله بیارای است و راههای مستقیم خود افغانستان است و راهی که ما را وصل میکنه از طریق تاجیکستان.
Even though no other nation formally recognized Taliban since they took over Afghanistan in 2021, Beijing has tried to develop relations with its administration. WION is now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news.
So the Belt and Road Initiative is one of the other issues that they have with India, obviously because of border rights and all that other shit. Here's a video about it right here. I mean, y'all should check that out. But with that being said, this has been another episode of CGT Podcast. Thank y'all for checking it out. Stay tuned. So we're gonna have to see how this turns out once again. Like, hopefully the fact that he didn't win with like no sweeping support means a lot, and people can get some type of balance in India, and they stop doing all that fucked up shit to Muslims, and they let all the political prisoners free in India, because that's just fucked up. And Modi can do as much economic justice as he wants to for the country. Obviously, that's not going to benefit everybody, especially in the way that he does it when you have a country full of 1 billion people. So there has to be some conversation about that whole border being made by Europeans thing, and the whole world almost. Countries and different states working with each other to redefine whatever they want to be. But yeah, with that being said, peace.